Welcome to the show where we expose new perspectives on our ever-evolving world through the lenses of various industries, cultures, and backgrounds. Our guests are disruptors, united by a common goal to bring their purpose to life. Whether they're from the commercial world or third sector, from the global north or the global south, expect an inspirational journey that will transform your perspective on just what is possible. My name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. Welcome to episode 98 of TIE Unearthed. Today, I'm speaking with my friend and university colleague from way back, Susy Martins. Now, we studied business together and graduated in 2001. And then the stars aligned, and we're now back in touch. Now, catching up with Susy after almost 20 years has been incredible. She's an accomplished business executive and executive coach whose career journey has spanned over 20 countries and some of the world's leading companies, from tech unicorns like Clearco and Apple Board to global giants such as General Electric and 3M. She's built and led high-performing teams, managed multi-million-dollar budgets, and navigated the unique challenges of scaling and adapting organizations. And now, through her boutique HR consultancy, she continues to drive transformation, offering coaching and strategic support to executives across industries. Now, in this conversation, Susy opens up about her life and career journey, sharing insights from her transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. We'll explore the role of connection and belonging in remote work environments. We talk about cultural intelligence and global mindsets, and the shifts in leadership that are shaping today's workplace. We'll also hear Susy's perspective on this term, conscious unbossing, a new paradigm that's reshaping leadership development for the next generation. So if you're looking to foster a more connected, engaged, and agile workforce, this one's for you. So grab that favorite beverage or throw on those running shoes, and here is Susy. Susy, I am so happy to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is so exciting for our listeners. Susy and I go way back to how many years are we talking? Over 20? It would be what, 23 or something?
We met when we were kids. Just joking.
Almost. I mean, it feels like it. We were at university together, and it's just, I'm so happy that the world has united us again. So this is just very exciting. So to kick off, it'd be really great to know, where are you? Where are you sitting right now?
So I'm in Canada. I'm in Kitchener, just south of Toronto.
Did you grow up in Kitchener? Are you from that region?
Yeah, I'm from southwestern Ontario, so a couple hours from here.
I would just love for you to just tell a little bit of a story as to who you are and just a little bit more about you. What brought you to where you are now?
Sure. So that's a fun one. We'll start in the region. So I'm from Canada, and I grew up in a small town. We'll go quicker after this. I basically went to Western, which is where Philippa and I met. I actually studied languages and kind of my own degree for the first couple of years of school. Then went to business school. I was really passionate at that time, which, this is the early 2000s, kind of in being global, right? In a global mindset, which was not that common back then. I wouldn't say, right? So my studies, I did an exchange to Northern Quebec because I was taking French. Then I went to Australia for an internship between my third and fourth year. And then I went to Spain in my fourth year, also for half a year. So I was just like, yes, the world is small. This is amazing. I like the idea of practicing the different languages and the business angle. So when I graduated, as Philippa knows, all of our friends became iBankers or consultants. And Philippa and I don't know, fell off the train or something. And then I was like, well, I don't know. I was like, I kind of feel like I want to work in something where I can use my languages. And I wanted to work with a really innovative company. And at that time, it was 3M. 3M is Post-it notes, all that type of stuff. So, and I started in customer service and then, and also logistics. So for me, that was super interesting. It was frontline and I was in it. I was speaking French and English and all the reflective materials, very interesting skill set. Anyways, I stayed there for a couple of years and then thought, you know what, I'd really like to get my stripes, and, really learn finance, right? And I still really wanted to go global, and I couldn't do that with 3M, even though I loved the organization. I needed to like leave and go somewhere else. So I ended up moving to Europe for pretty much the rest of my 20s. I went into finance and audit, which no one could believe. And I worked for General Electric. I, worked kind of across all of Europe, and then as an auditor around the world, working probably something like 20 countries at the time. And then I had the super geeky love story. Met my husband. He was an auditor. And then, and I was an auditor. And then we decided, to start our lives here in Canada, after we got married. So basically came back here, did my MBA with the thought of like, you know what, why not work for a Canadian company? I'd worked for these two big American companies, and came back and worked for Manulife, which is John Hancock in the US. So again, another 10 years. I've been in a lot of development programs, kind of rotating around. This was like at 4 to 6 years to general manager role. So, but at that time, I got in kind more into the operations, strategy, and HR side. So went through all of those rotations and then continued down that path. Had a couple kids, and then managed teams probably up to like 1,000 people during that time. And then in the last 5 years, I've transitioned into tech. I had the opportunity here where I live in Canada. There's a tech center here. It's like the home of the smartphone, right? Which is amazing. So like Google's headquartered here, a lot of different things that was always around me. So I ended up moving out of, kind of these corporates to go and help like a startup that was helping students actually to go study abroad. So I joined Applyboard. I was their chief people, this company that was truly a rocket ship and, growing like mad globally, and 4 billion valuation. And, we were hiring 200 people a month. It was amazing. And it was cool because their hashtag was, something that would align with you, Philip, is like educate the world, right? And really helping students and making education a right, not just a privilege. So that was super cool. And then from there, I worked with another Canadian unicorn, like $2 billion valuation at the time, that basically was helping founders, get funding without taking equity. So I did all of that, and then kind of got to the end of that, and brings you to what I'm doing today is that, I did the rocket ship, and then the next one did kind of like the market switched, and we did a lot of restructuring and all of that great stuff. And I got to the end of that, and I thought, you know what, like, maybe what I should do is start my own business. I've always wanted to do it, business student at core. And I thought after I got, quote unquote, a lot of experience, that would be cool to jump back in and do my own thing. So that was about 2 years ago. So now I own my own HR boutique company, and I kind of work half the time on HR strategy and business strategy projects, and then the other half in the exec coaching realm. So never a dull moment, really a portfolio of a career is kind of now, and having fun.
What are just a couple of things that you miss about Europe being based where you are? But also, what were things that you really missed about Canada when you were there? So what are you happy that you're back to having close to you? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think the one thing, like, just to start with your second question, the one thing I missed when I was there, like as a mid-20s person, kind of going through it all of my 20s, was the sense of humor, right? Because you would be somewhere and you'd have like jokes, and I'd be like, oh, no one even understands this joke. This is such a good one. You're like, oh my God, you'd be in this like whole different realm where, people are really different. Like you think, oh yeah, everybody's the same, or I'm European. My parents are from Europe. I've been to Europe like many times as a child. It's not the same. Being Canadian, I make eye contact. I'll smile at you. You know what I mean? Like this is generally not the way people carry themselves around. Like from my experience, when I worked with them, they're a bit more serious. Just the whole idea of making friends, in North America, and like I always had a pack of friends, like girlfriends and guy friends. And it is brave to move abroad. And, people think, oh, that sounds cool. Like, and I'm sure Philip, you've heard this too, right? Like, oh, that's so cool. You went to Brazil, but I'm sure it wasn't easy, right? Like you have to then reestablish yourself. You have to try and speak these different languages, which I think it's humbling. It's a good experience. And then you appreciate everybody just has an accent, right? Like not to judge anyone. And it's good to have that struggle yourself and just to figure out, how do I just fit in here? I feel like you become more malleable. You adapt better being with anyone, right? Because I could never choose who I was with. I would be sent on audits. I would be with whoever the auditors were, and then whoever the business was in whatever location I was sent, right? So what's, the best way to get things done, and just figuring out how to navigate and figuring out how to just see the good in everyone, because that's who was around you. And that's, and I think that's good practice, right? Because otherwise you can tend to find people, the whole idea of having diversity in life and organizations is diversity of thought and experiences. And if you're in it like that, you live it, right? And you can find out that someone who's totally different than you is super awesome, right? That you normally wouldn't sit down and talk to, but you just happen to be stationed with them.
It's amazing, isn't it? And those are skills. I mean, with both of our work, certainly with Ty and what I do with getting people to be exposed to these different challenges and different situations around the world. And essentially it's to help develop these competencies. And one of them is this cultural intelligence, right? And so it's being able to truly understand, how do you gain the trust of people who are different to you? How do you find that common humanity that even though they don't get your jokes, but it's kind of like, okay, let's try again. What is the commonality that we have here that we can figure out where we join up in some place? It's amazing because it's not really something that you can learn in a PowerPoint presentation. It's something that you genuinely have to just go through it. But at the beginning, like you say, it's bloody hard. Because it's like a muscle that you have to kind of build, isn't it? And you have to grow through this. And I remember having my phone with very few numbers in it. And you'd go to a party and be like, oh, do you want my number? And you're well, I don't think we'd be the best friends in the whole world, but I'll just add them to my phone book, and I'll sort of stick them in my phone. And then I don't know who to hang out with. And you sort of call these people and you're like, hi, do you want to hang out? And you sort of just force yourself to be friends with people that you wouldn't normally be friends with. But it's amazing because the more you do that, the more you kind of grow that muscle. So
100%. And I think the other thing I noticed when I went to Europe was that, I was in a finance program and I was kind of more of a generalist coming in, obviously from customer service and logistics. Everybody else was an accountant or the iBanker type of person. But what I noticed and what I learned at that time is that from a young age in Canada, you would start with show and tell or something like that in kindergarten. This is my stuffy. It does this, it does whatever, right? And then you do 2-minute pitches. You do all of these things when you're a kid here and you're constantly presenting your ideas. And I never even thought about this ever in my life until I moved to Europe. Then I go there and they're like, wow, you're really good at presenting. And I think I always have been pretty good at presenting, but at the same time in North America, I'd say a lot of people are good at presenting, right? Like, because there's so much practice and emphasis on that. Whereas you see all these people come from around the world and from Europe, that was not the focus. It was more on the grind, the math, the whatever. So then I realized, and I think it's something that's still true at work, and I see it in my work now, is that packaging is so important in terms of how you communicate, you manage yourself through different scenarios. In the example of finance, I would do well and I'd get picked maybe to keep on going in a program or do something. And then someone else I would say could run circles around me from a math perspective or something, that was a genius. They wouldn't get there because they couldn't communicate what they meant. That's the key, right? People practice that their whole life, right? They just try and they try to figure it out. And you can see that they're kind of following some sort of template in their mind of ways to do it or things they've read about these types of things. But I think there's a real normal progression here in our society on that. And it's the give and take. We're definitely not as technical, right? Whereas they're...
Yeah. And then that's why diversity is so important in teams, right? You've just explained why it's so important to understand where you thrive, also what you're so good at and where your skills lie. And then understanding, perhaps it's a cultural thing, perhaps it's an education thing, perhaps it's just a personal competencies thing, why you need to actually have these diverse teams with people from different places and different backgrounds and everything, because their education, their background, just how they've been brought up, it provides different ways of seeing the world and being able to do things. Yeah, fascinating. What was that catalyst that got you wanting to do what you're doing now? You said that you had the one role where everything was just growing and you had sort of hiring people 200 people a day or something month. I don't even know what you said. It was crazy. But then, the next role was a very different scenario. And obviously things weren't as positive, but there had to have been a moment where you just thought, every founder has a founder story. And I just wonder, what was that for you?
I don't know. When you're in corporate and, you're doing that grind, you're climbing that ladder and then being surrounded in a tech city, you always think that, I could do that. I've always wanted to be in the action. So, and I think it just, in a weird way, you would never think that would have been the way that I would have started. And people were shocked when I started my business because I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And the next thing that happened is I probably got the most job offers that I've ever had. The other thing that happened is everybody who was in corporate was like, I'm watching you, because they couldn't believe it that I went from a C-suite to basically jump off the ledge and just say, I'm going to do this myself and just see what happens and give it a go, because I think it would be awesome. And I've seen so many other people. We have so many classmates who have done it, right? That went out and started their own thing, including yourself. I'd always dreamed dreamed when I was in school, actually, that I would work for many years and then, gain all this knowledge and earn the right to go maybe be a professor or something and teach at university. That was always my original dream. And it kind of changed because now I'm doing that, but in a different way that I never thought of or even existed at the time. So I think my founder dream started a long time ago. It kind of just happened the way it is. And I'm a big believer that things play out the way they should. So you just knock out what you're doing right now and you do that all the time and you'll always find your next step. Maybe not the typical aha, but I think it just kept on coming at me. You know what I mean? Until you're just like, all right, this is it. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because when you're open to the universe, I think some people, I feel like more in North America, they sort of over plan. I'm going to, go to high school, then I'm going to go to university and I'm going to get married and then I'm going to have this job and I'm going to get retired and, and then I die. And it's kind of like this. I don't feel like Europe is like when I was working with people in London, maybe it was in advertising too, but God, it's not linear at all. I mean, I just feel like people don't study advertising to go into advertising. Some people do, but when I was at BBH, they on purpose did not hire people who studied advertising that went into advertising. If you studied architecture or philosophy or Russian studies or Japanese something or other, and then you go into advertising, yes, that's what we want. We want different thinking and people who are curious. And I feel if you see the world like that and you don't overplan it and you don't necessarily know where you're going or how you're going to get there, but you feel it and then and then you follow that feeling within you. Yeah, I find that amazing because I feel more people need to be open to that. Don't feel like you need to follow some conventional way of doing things. And also don't feel that you need to know what's going to happen in 10 years. You need to follow what makes you feel a certain way. And if things don't feel good, then figure out what that is. But then just be open to the universe. And I just think it's unbelievable when you do that, how things just work out.
Sometimes people will be like, so what'd you learn being an entrepreneur? What would be your advice? I get a lot of those types of questions. And a person that I spoke to when I was like thinking about doing this, he was like a mentor. And I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, well, Susie, let me ask you something. Could you not make money for an entire year? And I was like, well, I could. I was like, would I want to? No, I guess I could do that. He's like, well, you need that freedom of mind to actually start your own business. And at first I was like, yeah, okay, logical. But as I continued on my journey, I was like, that was really insightful because when you have a job, you make a salary every couple of weeks or however you get paid every month, maybe for people listening. And you're used to that regular salary, going on. And when you start, and this is a pretty basic point, but it's very true, is that when you're in your own business, it's not linear, right? Like you could have a month that you make $1 and then you could have another month where you make $1 million. You know what I mean? Like it's just like up and down and it's normal. Right? It's like normal, just like a big business, but now you're your own business, right? So, and, everybody says, well, I'm a founder. I was like, no, I'm a vendor because people come to me and want things on their schedule and I'm serving them, in terms of what they need, which means, hey, you may have thought things would happen in September, October, and November, and now they're all happening in November and you're one person and you're creamed in November, but the other months were not as busy because you're still working it out because you're on this mass schedule, right? For everybody. So anyways, yeah, I thought that was really good advice because the worst thing you could do is put yourself in financial, I think, stress and not have that freedom or people around you that would encourage you to keep on going, right? Mm-hmm. Because my husband's like, don't worry about it, just keep on going, right? You're fine, you're moving, you're getting momentum, right? But you have to be in that environment. So that helped me. And I tell people that all the time because you don't want to be so stressed. And I've seen when people are stressed out, a lot of the founders in the ecosystem, and what they do is they do things that I would call desperate, right? Like they try to charge for anything. So let's say you're a coach. Would you charge your friends? I would never charge my friends. But then other people have made the decision to, charge friends or upcharge them and things like that. It just doesn't seem like a good long play. You know what I mean? Or not the way I would like to proceed, right? With my business. So that money factor, because you start feeling that pressure, it shows out in everything you're doing.
What gets you excited every day?
I think for me, I really like the variety of my work because I just started off early with audit and I've always done lots of different jobs. I'm a true generalist. I've worked probably in almost every functional area, all different angles on business. So I always have a few projects on the go. And then I always have a bunch of people I'm coaching. I think there's 15 companies I work with right now. So it's 15 companies you're learning about and all these different people. And the really cool thing is that a lot of them are scaling companies. So I could talk to someone today and in 2 weeks, they've already implemented what we talked about.
Wow, that's so
So
good.
it's like you're in those companies. Before, I would have never dreamt about that because I was always navigating so many people, right, in your own organization trying to get stuff done. And now you feel like you're a real multiplier. The other thing is that I don't think I grew up in a lot of leadership programs and, where there's a lot of investment in class with my leaders, the whole culture, like a GE culture is all about leadership or any of the companies I worked with. And I didn't do that by design. It just happened that way. So then you get primed as leadership principles. And now I feel like when I talk to people that I work with, there's not that investment anymore. It's not a thing. It's not like a gold card to be a leader right now. And everybody seems to be, I'm using air quotes, too busy to talk to one another. So therefore, they don't have anyone in their corner. Like, I feel like I'm someone in their pocket that they can just talk to about stuff that they would love to talk to you about with anyone, but it's like almost like people are passing ships inside of organizations right now. That gets me excited too, that I get to really help them because I'll just develop work products with them. I'll be like, okay, let's think about this. Does this make sense? Who are you talking to? Let's try. Let's test it out. I feel like I'm actually their leader, and I feel like that's such a missing capability.
It's about connection, isn't it? And it's about feeling a part of something. And it's interesting that you're needing to be that person for the people that you're working with. I'm just wondering before we get there. So what are you doing? I mean, you said that you're coaching, and I know that that's not the only thing that you do, but it's a big part of what you're doing. What is working with the people that you're working with?
They all need different things. The good thing about coming with such a background is that I could jump in and look at any scenario they're looking at and help them do it. And what I've learned about coaching is that people are better or worse at using their coach, which is something no one ever talks about. For example, this one person I coach, she is a 12 out of 10 on how to use a coach. She'll come prepared and she'll think about things that normal people would not think of using their coach, I don't think, or nobody else does that I coach. So for example, she'll be like, hey, I'm planning an offsite. I'm going to prepare with you for my offsite. She is a managing director. So I'm working with her and she's saying, this is really important. This needs to go well. I want to make sure people connect. I want to make sure they come together, and we'll talk about, okay, let's think about a flow. Who could you bring in to influence this? What kind of breakouts could you have? I helped her even script what she would say. It's not something that you prescribe, say like, I'm going to coach on that, but I did for that purpose for her. Or she'll come, hey, I'm going to do performance reviews. I'd love to vet this with you to make sure that I'm really got a really good second set of eyes on this. And these are extremely senior people. So they're not going to go to the CEO of some big company, you know what I mean? Or whatever company and be like, hey, do you want to talk about this before I talk to you about it? Like, no one has time for that, right? She's really smart. She comes to me and we'll talk about it. And we'll talk about potential and performance together and talk about questioning where some of these people are as like kind of a person who kind of knows the essence of the organization, but I don't know every player intimately. So I'll ask tough questions about that. So I'll do stuff like that. Sometimes I'll create even, for example, like a presentation deck with them. Last week, for example, I was coaching another person that was thinking about their organization and how they're actually thinking about having a PE firm come in and invest a lot of money. It would be a major multiplier for them. And they're like, what do you think about this? Like, what should we be thinking about? And I actually brought up the idea of having like an event. I was like, why wouldn't you have an employee event where you could actually have everybody win? You know what I mean? Like, so an event would be, you'd pay out people on the options that they have in the organization or some portion of them. Because I've done this type of work, you bring out ideas and then you help them explore them. So now this person's exploring their organization. Could we do this? Does this make sense to do this? And what is the happy path for employees as we continue to change how the organization is structured and it's funded to keep people on the journey with us? And how can they win? If someone's been with the organization for a long time, you want them to live that dream with you. Like founders always say, join my company, you can get lots of options and equity and we're all going to win together. So then they need to win at some point. Like if you're going to get all this money, it would be great to have an event. So there's lots of different things because I bring a finance background, ops, the HR, everything, a lot of people leadership. It could be like 5 million scenarios, but I like that. It's hard, right? Like it sounds like easy, but it's not easy. And when you're by yourself thinking about it, you just don't think of it as many angles as with another person, right?
Listening to your background and listening to what you're doing, you could have only got to where you are now with your background. I mean, you couldn't be providing that understanding and the help for people without having gone through it yourself and through so many different scenarios. I mean, just the skyrocketing company, the company that's you've done it all. Like, it's just amazing. And it does make sense for them to have that outside perspective who's also not in the culture of the company. For anyone who's listening, who is in that role of being a managing director or a chief people officer or whatever sort of the C-suite role is, to have that opportunity to talk to someone who literally has been in so many of those different positions, it totally makes sense why you could really add value. When we were talking, the last time that we talked actually, which gave us the idea to have this podcast, we were really riffing on the whole sort of being more human and the area that obviously I talk about in my book, which is around connection and belonging. And how workplaces, like the cultures of a workplace just are so much more competitive, or just a much better place to be when they are more human. Great business is obviously how you make people feel. It's creating that culture of connection and belonging. It's about employees being customers themselves. So rather than just being cogs in a wheel and being seen as, just a necessary part of the business, it's actually recognizing that we need to treat our employees almost as customers as well as the actual customers. And, so therefore people need to feel empowered and excited about working where they work and feel like they're valued, so that obviously they then stay. And it feels to me like many companies are getting this wrong. A lot of companies don't understand the importance and what it means to be more people-centered or people-focused, and creating those human environments. The knock-on effect is more profit. And I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this area of connection, and also just insights of what is happening in the job market right now. So I just wonder, what are your thoughts on connection? What are you seeing and what are you hearing?
Just to give some stats, just to start with that, what's the market look like? 1 in 2 people are disengaged at work, actively disengaged. I would say it's probably higher than that. Those are the stats if you look at Gartner, except people who do this as a living to benchmark. Another interesting one that, is a real shift in the market is that 1 in 4 people are looking for their next job on their first day of a job. Can you imagine? So a quarter of people who join an organization are already thinking about leaving. Why is this happening? And I think that it's the affordability crisis that we're in. Things are so expensive that, you have your Maslow's, hierarchy of needs. They're not getting met. So, when people are thinking about I have to afford my house, and all these things that I'm already paying for, I'm joining this company and now I don't know, I need to commute to work. So that extra cost, I don't want to do that. So I'll take this job now, but as soon as one opens up that I don't have to commute, I'm gone, or whatever the personal reasons may be. But it sucks, right? And it does also go back to connection. That what am I seeing? I think it's pretty cool. I've started following a company that talks about organizational network mapping. And that's a fancy word to talk about how many people are you connected to at work. So there's organizations that go out there and they'll actually create, it kind of looks like if you thought about the Big Dipper, right? And you connect out all the dots of how people are connected in an organization. So right now, the average amount of people that someone knows when they start in an organization that's new, that's new to the organization and is hybrid, is 3. 3 people. That's it. So how can you be connected to an org if you only really know 3 people? You know your manager, maybe the person who hired you, and then another person you might deal with on a regular basis. So that makes the conditions for connection much more complicated. Now you're really relying on the leader. And then that leader needs to be good at remote and hybrid management, which is also not easy, but also more than that, you need to be organized and it's time consuming. You have to put a lot of effort into, and it has to be very intentional when everything is remote, to be thinking about why would someone come in? What are we going to do for the whole time someone's in the office? How are you logistically going to do that? How am I going to stay on top of, talking with you, making sure you know what you're supposed to be doing in your job every day, when everybody feels run over in their job because they feel like they have too much work because things are much more flat, right? And they're also new to their role, doing the same thing that, the person who's trying to connect into the org wants to do. So I think this is an issue. Work has changed so much that there needs to be probably new roles around how do you make things more intentional and make it easier to create the structure for connection. I did a talk last week on Disrupt HR. I talked about the new ways of measuring our workforce and just talked about connection a bit, and then also talked about the opportunity to change how we look at workforces. Because the reality is people will say something like, 80% of people went to our town hall, 95% of people completed onboarding. And you say, that's pretty good. It's both over 80%, whatever, this big high swipe. But on a people side, we have the opportunity to go down to the individual data perspective. So my advice was, why don't you create an individual index for your organization? 6 moments that matter, that would be so important that you'd want every employee to be there or participate or, have whatever outcome in those moments. And then measure that for every single employee. And then you'll be able to see, hey, this group of employees is a 12 out of 10, man. They're always there. These are our shiny stars. And then what's going on with this other group that's just missing all those marks, right? They're making up that gap between the 80 and the 100, probably the same people. So you can get ahead of it, right? And kind of figure it out. And maybe certain managers aren't asking employees to attend. Could be anything, right? Could be just they don't know that they should be there, or they got disconnected at a critical point where you could have really engaged that workforce. So things are just changing. It's a big shift from you can't use in-office old practices for this dynamic workforce that is not very connected to the workforce right now.
What is conscious unbossing?
So conscious unbossing is a new term. I think it was Korn Ferry coined conscious unbossing in some of the work that they've done, or they've written an article about it, where it's about 70% of Gen Zs basically don't aspire to be a leader. They call this unbossing. When we graduated from school, Philippa, like it was the dream, you would meet everybody and be so respectful. Almost everybody would want to go up to that leadership stream, right? This is completely the opposite now, because now it's seen as, why would I want to do this? I don't get training to do it. I don't get paid that much more money to do it. I want to live my life and have better balance. This is a very tricky thing, because we obviously need, someone to be a leader in the organization. And that's a huge part of the work population right now. I wrote an article about this once about conscious unbossing. And what I talked about is, like, when I graduated from school too, it was the boomers that were already projected to be retiring in, I don't know, like 20 years or something. And they had what they called the talent gap. So the talent gap was, we have to fill all these leadership roles because all of this whole population is going to retire out. So that's why they developed so many leadership programs. And that's why all of us, our generation of Xers or Ys, basically got this presence of all the leadership development programs with the intention originally of filling that gap. Those don't exist anymore. Those have been gone to the wayside. They're so expensive. And a lot of them aren't even that successful. But the companies that were good at them are known for developing leaders, right? I called out a while ago just to see, does anyone have a good example of a company that's known for developing leaders right now? Because I don't know one. I wish I did. Because I'm I would say GE was the forefathers. They used to spend $1 billion billion a long time ago to develop leaders every year, just in L&D. Amazing. Of course, they had strong leaders. And then every time leaders would leave, they become CEOs of other companies. And there's so many examples of that. There's other organizations that would be in that vertical of being leader developers. I think a lot of the consumer packaged goods or banks, financial services would still have some good intake programs that would develop leaders. And especially because they have to keep their attractiveness somehow too. Because who wants to work in insurance right now? Right? I did it for a while. And I think, there's a lot of purpose in it, but out of school, everybody wants to work at Chat GPT, like OpenAI, right? So
how do you set people up for success?
I think it's the basics. Number one is alignment. I think that's it. If you can get aligned, that's the number one step to success. So do you know what your goals are? This is a piece that seems so basic. Definitely not. People mostly are kind of off on what their goals are, or they're off on the communication and tracking of their goals with their leaders. Those are the two pieces. If you can nail that, spend your time being very clear on what your goals are. And then as you're progressing and working, making sure that you're communicating with your leader and stakeholders of what have you been up to, right? How are you trending towards those, but also packaging up the things you do. And generally what I tell people is communicate with your leaders as, here's the great stuff that I've been doing and getting momentum on. Here are the other things I need your help with. And here's a general update on my business as usual stuff, projects, and then people on my team, like who's sick, moving, leaving, pregnant, whatever, all those types of things, right? So that everybody's up to date on life at work as well as what's going on. And it will take you 1 hour a week for sure, like to be organized so you can communicate clearly all these things and package them out. But you couldn't spend any time better than that, because it makes you rethink, like, what am I doing? Am I aligned? Where am I spending my time? Right? And like, can I communicate this to someone else in a succinct way that is still aligned to our goals? If I go back and keep myself and my teams and my peers or whatever you have aligned to the same kind of North Star. So I think.
And it makes you so much more intentional, doesn't it? Just as far as ensuring that you're actually doing what you want to be doing. I think sometimes it's so easy for us to you're just sort of plowing through the to-do list and sort of, okay. And then people are throwing a whole lot of stuff at you and you're like, okay, I just need to get it done. And then suddenly you reflect a little bit and think, what the heck am I doing? This isn't even what I signed up for. This isn't even what I want to be doing. And I think what's interesting is just when you're talking about earlier, when you talked about your coaching and how some people say, oh, I'm going to charge my friends. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't charge my friends. It's a fine line from the point of view of whatever it is that we're doing. We do need to be intentional. And we also need to be very careful, not to be people pleasers, to be kind, but not to be people pleasers, and to be doing things that actually make sense for us too. And I think it's very easy for us to just say yes to everything. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Because if you wanted to get that promotion, or if you, don't want to let people down. But at the same time, your time is important. You need to look after you because you've got your family, you've got your home life. But at the same time, you want to do your job well, but also you need to be in an okay place in order to be able to do all of that. And that also does mean perhaps charging for your time. And okay, you can choose, maybe there's sort of a number of freebies that you're going to do. But at the same time, you just need to be so careful about what you're taking on. And from the point of view of just even what you're saying is those goals, to be intentional about what you're doing in your work, whether you work for yourself or you work in a role in a corporate, it is so, so, so important to have those check-ins. Talk to your boss about what you're doing, because I think obviously, particularly in this virtual world, it's so important just to ensure that everybody's clear on what everyone's doing. Because otherwise, if you're not talking about stuff, it's sometimes just, it gets complicated. But yeah, also just for you to have those reflections. I mean, I just think that is so important on so many levels.
Yeah. One framework I've used that's really basic in that space is called the 3-3-1. What are the 3 things I did last week? The 3 things I'm going to do this week? And what's the 1 thing or more that I need help with? Done. Because you could spin around. And the thing with the 3-3-1, I developed that in a fast moving environment, because sometimes we'll talk, right? Philippa will be like, let's do this, blah, 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 right? And then all of a sudden, everything changes course between that time I talked to you and 4 days later. You need to make sure that you're tracking. So you have to force that function, figure out what it is. And 3-3-1, highly recommend.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. Do you have any other takeaways or tools that people can use with their teams? I mean, I think 3-3-1 is a great one. Is there anything else that you have?
Yeah, 3-3-1 is really easy. You can do that tomorrow. Just in the spirit of, I was just talking about all this new workforce measurement and what you can do. And I think the coolest tech that I've seen in the last 2 years since I've started my business that I've done a lot of work with is neurotech surveys. So everybody knows an engagement survey. So that's basically, you ask a bunch of questions. People say, I see myself here in 2 years or whatever, like the questions might be. What neurotech does is it adds on another dimension of measuring how you really feel about it. So it has algorithms built into it that basically will tell you the alignment between what someone says versus how they feel. And what you find in the end is this picture of where people are aligned and where they're not aligned between how they feel and what they say. So you can imagine, here's a few thoughts. So why would this be useful? Just in general, it is. And you'll find one that people usually, if you said, Susie, what's going to come out of my engagement survey? Listen, you don't even have to do it. I'll tell you right now. It's, I want to get more pay. I want more flexibility, and I want to develop. You don't even need an engagement survey. 99% of the time, unless something's off the charts, need of work in your organization outside of that, those are the 3 that will always come up. If you do the neurotech survey, generally what comes up is comp usually isn't one of the top ones. It has started creeping up because of the affordability pressures and whatnot. But in general, it's more around goals, alignment on goals with your leader. I know what my goals are. That comes up as a big gap. Another one that comes up is communication, manager communication. These are things that usually don't come up. The other thing that happens with these surveys is that the leaders, so every leader knows when an engagement survey comes along, their team's going to get measured on engagement. So rarely are they going to really tank out the scores, right? So you'll see, we actually did one once where people on the leadership team were really low engagement. Let's say 20 points lower than the rest of the company. This is concerning. And I was like, let's do it again. Maybe something happened just to test it. Same thing again. So again, they said they were fully engaged when they totally were not, right? So I think that it can be insightful to have this, to see what would it say, and it bring out these different dimensions of how people feel.
And how does it work? So I can include it in the notes.
Yeah, Truthsayers are the 4 founders of this. So basically they have over 500 billion data points on this. They're based in the UK actually, and they work with a lot of big companies. They're the back office for Aon, which is the 4 founders of engagement surveys. So they've moved into this new tech. Okay. And then in North America, there's another company called Jome. But yeah, I think this tech is on point. It is very good. And you'll get every result. Some organizations, if they're very blunt and very transparent, basically all the results are super aligned. And I've seen one organization like this where you're like, this is amazing. Everybody is saying exactly how they feel, which is great. But then there's always some micro findings. Let's say your most important group of producers, if you're in a clinic, like a dentist or a fertility person, the embryologist, all of these types of specialized roles, you have to watch those closely too, to see how do they feel about things really, because these surveys give you a lot of different dimensions of how to think about it in every level. So even demographics, it's interesting because demographics, usually nobody says anything, but you could see certain groups where I've seen that people of a certain ethnic background feel very differently than others. It's fascinating. It's just more data, right? So why would you go with face value data when you have this other level of data? It's all based off of Harvard implicit time studies. So they're very well researched. So that's a cool one.
Thank you. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
No, I'm Team Philippa. I think what you do in your work is amazing. That I love that you wrote your book and it's out there. So I'm happy to support that all day long. And continued luck on your journey and what you're doing. So yeah.
Thank you, Susie. Oh, well, it's amazing how we started at Ivy getting to know each other and sort of went on various different routes and have found our way back to not a dissimilar area. So it's so good. Thank you for being with us. And until the next time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with TIE. If you're looking to create better leaders, better companies, and a better world, that's just what we do by helping leaders tap into their greatest asset, their humanity. We have a number of corporate programs that impact a range of people, from individuals at a company to 500 people around a business. Or check out my book, Return on Humanity, Leadership Lessons from All Corners of the World. You'll find the answers to how business can truly become a positive force while remaining at the forefront of competition. You can find all the information you need on all of this at TIEleadership.com. Get in touch and I can explain more. A huge thanks to Berna Vieira for co-producing this with me and for creating the music. I hope we'll meet up again soon.